Some more cardstock if you wanted to cut out a shirt or something for your character.
I have another one. Kids, I have some little ones. Pencils. A couple color pencils. Rather, couple color pencils. There's a little more control. Need that. Here you go. I got the primaries. Pretty little blue.
So the thread we have been using, most of the kids have been using it for hair. I will tell you that getting this stuff to stick on for hair is not super easy. But yeah, please go for it in terms of trying to draw yourself as the Lego character. What?
I don't really ever decorate it.
On the other side, sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. This is why we write them first so that you can do that flat, and then once you put it together, you can flip it over and.
That's it.
Yeah, and these scissors are probably not the best fabric scissors, so you might really have to work. Cut.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Did you make this up, or did you learn this from someone?
We've been doing this in one of our engineering projects. It's a way to get the kids to. We used to do the drawn engineer, but found that we were interpreting way too much. And so then we did this with small little Lego characters, but then they wanted to keep their Lego characters. We didn't have enough of them.
So sweet.
So we decided to go with this.
So this is one of yours.
Yeah.
She really likes graphic design. You have water, and then there's the scissor brush. There's water in the brush. Thank you. Yeah, she definitely has more of mom.
I like that you
I don't know. She knows that she's sort of like over.
travel with materials.
I travel with materials.
That's a real maker right there. Are any of these folks you didn't? Are any of these folks people you didn't know from before?
I am not totally sure.
You didn't. I'd love to think that our hours finding every email address for every school
Right.
in Vermont.
Yeah. And I did get a couple last minute ones today of people saying, something came up.
Wish I
can't
could.
tell."
Aw.
I think we're maybe expecting one more, which is Jamie from Richland.
Okay. Yeah. And that's Jamie's a STEM coach. Is that right?
She's a STEM coach, like middle school STEM coach.
I know. I reached out to her. She was one person originally from my,
Okay.
but she might have already been in the network before.
Because you have a pretty good relationship with Center.
So what I was saying to Julie Marie is the origin of this. I mentioned a little bit. We have a project where we're working with a group in Boston who does STEM outreach through engineering, and we were to try to figure out where the kids are and where they go through that project. We had used something called the Draw an Engineer or Draw a Scientist, which has been used for years. And typically what they see as results from that is a very stereotypical image. So usually for the scientists, it's an old white man with Albert Einstein type hair, with a lab coat on and that sort of thing. When we used it, we found that in their drawings we were making too many inferences, which didn't feel comfortable. So if it was a boy drawing the picture and the person had short hair, we just assumed it was a male with longer hair, and that type of inference. And because we get these sheets and we don't have the kids to ask, we didn't feel comfortable about that. So what we moved to was having them create little Lego characters that could look like themselves. And then we gave them, and we did this in a number of the schools in Richland, Bean Blossom, in a number of the classes there. Then we gave them 20 minutes to make a scene to show us what their engineer was doing or what problem it was trying to solve. And that helped, but that was still challenging. And like I said, they wanted to keep the Lego character. So we shifted to trying to make something more like this, using something a friend of ours at Purdue did, but modifying it in a number of ways, and trying to get some of this information on the back and then allow them to draw something, but they could also take it home. And part of the idea with this is, what we realized as we were doing this is it's part intervention. So it may not work as an intervention for you all, but the idea is that they are making themselves as an engineer, and so we're literally asking them to sort of put themselves and make themselves as an engineer. And so we're still trying to refine exactly how this goes, but this was one of our most recent iterations. And it was amazing to see, we just did this at a STEM event up in Fishers that had 60 or 80 girls, 6th through 8th grade girls come and do this. And we didn't get all of them to participate in this, but they did an amazing job. And we're taking one of the girls in particular. She was at the extreme end of things, but she cut a bunch of thread and spent time braiding the hair.
Oh, that's what I thought. Just
and so we were saying, but your hair, your hair's not braided now. Is that still you, or are you making something else? She said, well, I always braid my hair. I let it down this afternoon or whatever, but I always go to school with it braided and stuff. And so she was trying to make the exact image of herself.
So sweet.
So it was quite interesting to see the time that people take.
And then Adam, is the idea to transform their thinking, their own identity about who they are and who they can be?
Yeah, ideally, and what we're thinking of for this is that we would do it at the end of the intervention and see if they are using more of the language, some of the terms that they'd write down, that they're writing down things that are showing a more advanced understanding of what engineering is, or what they can do with it, the types of problems they can solve. So perhaps while we're doing this, if we can go around, because I don't think everybody knows each other, and just introduce ourselves, and then we'll maybe do another round, and you can. Well, is everyone done?
Sure.
Okay. Let's do it together then. Maybe what we'll do is I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and if you feel comfortable, if you can share. Just share quickly sort of what you wrote on the back. That would be great, and start off the conversation, and then we'll move into some more of the actual visioning work that we had said we would do today. I did not create one, but I'll start with myself. I'm Adam Maltese from the School of Ed, and Julie Marie and I'll let her introduce herself, but she and I have been trying to figure out ways to work together and sort of work in the community. And last year we got a little bit of funding from a national organization who tries to support this type of work to do this. And so this is really the first meeting of trying to get together and provide some guidance and some ideas. But we're hoping to be able to do this sort of at least for the next year and a half in a variety of different ways and in different locations around the community. So hopefully we'll be a resource, but we don't want to be the only resource. Hopefully you'll see that everyone else is a resource as well. Do you want to
Sure.
go next?
Hey, I'm Julie Marie, and I am the head of the library and the School of Education where Adam is located at Indiana University. But my heart and soul is with schools, and I spent, before I came to Indiana University, I spent time designing makerspace in the Greenwich, Connecticut area. Tommy Hilfiger was one of our dads, so we were able to just think big and not worry about costs, not think about supplies. We had everything that we could dream of at our fingertips, and so that was a great experience. I spent some time taking some Harvard classes in maker education, and when I came back home to Indiana, it was great to meet up with Adam because he's full of ideas and full of resources, and this is a great excuse for great excuse for me to spend more time learning from Adam and also learning more, from you all as well. So I'm glad to be here.
You all want to start?
All right, I'm Shannon Burge from Shoals, and this is kind of all new to me. One of my strengths, I think, is I think I like to try new ideas, bring different things into my classroom to make it a little bit more exciting. The problem there in the belly there is just the time and the space to be able to bring it all in, finding time to do it. I've been, ever since I came to the one in December, I've been trying to do little things with just some tubs and stuff, and it's been fun. The kids like it, but just find the time and space. One of my arms there was the making strength, and I think it kind of goes back to my teaching strength, just kind of the desire to learn and want to find out more about it. Something I need to improve in, I think, is I don't feel like I'm very creative.
I'm the same.
As you can see, I mean, so hopefully this will help.
very far, did we?
You know, I was looking at yours with a little suspender and thinking, why did I think about that?
She lives in the makerspace world.
But maybe someday I'll get there after all this.
Right.
And up in the head there, I think to be a risk taker, I think is some of the mental capacity that you have to be able to willing to take the risk of different things you make and you build and things like that. So.
I'm Shannon Wagler, and I'm from Lagodi Elementary. One of my teaching strengths, I put reading strategies because I'm a first grade teacher, so that's an important thing in first grade. I don't know if it was supposed to connect to makerspace, but
However you interpret it.
that was one of the legs. And then my other leg, something that I want to improve is just managing my daily schedule. The school that I'm at, Lagodi, we're just, over the past probably 2 to 3 years, we've just really brought on a lot of STEM activities, PLTW, now we're making the makerspace, but just to find time to get all that in. So the belly, my problem is time. One of my strengths, I feel like, is I'm doing the STEM fellow training with ROI. So that's, I'm learning all kinds of STEM stuff all this whole year I have been. So that's helping me. And something to improve with the makerspace is just letting them be free to create and not being the teacher and wanting to say here's a challenge, because when we first started STEM a couple of years ago, we were always giving them a problem or a challenge to try to solve, where the makerspace, I think, is leaning more toward just free creation. And then in the head, an important thing I just thought was creativity and just using your imagination.
Okay. Who else wants to jump in and go next?
I can. My name is Cassidy Young. I teach visual arts at the Academy of Science and Entrepreneurship. Wyatt's a little artist. I have some experience with supplies and managing supplies, so I think of that as a strength when doing in a makerspace. I don't have that with all of the tools and supplies that I would. Okay, I'm an artist and I'm an art teacher, and I love to get as many new shiny things as I could. So then there's always the problem of having Tommy Hilfiger help with making things happen. So organizing them and making that's so the experience, but organization is a thing, and whether that's organization of the materials themselves or how the time is used or how the students learn to manage those materials, that's kind of my balance. Let's see.
So just quickly, was the materials something you want to, in the organization, something you want to improve on, or something?
I
you
would
think-
like to improve on organizing,
Okay.
whether that's time
Okay.
or the stuff or the scaffolding for the students. So organizing is a really big
Sure,
word,
sure,
and,
sure.
and I'm sorry that
No, we'll leave it
that's
big,
so
too.
full
Yeah.
of
Okay.
stuff. Okay, if I go to the belly, okay, wait. I got material. They're almost the same thing for the hands, really, and the legs, the arms and the legs. It's like I'm happy with my material stuff, and organization is an issue. If I go down, I guess if I go to the leg, I still have experience with materials, and then the other one is something I want to improve for the students would be their agency and clean up.
Okay.
Clean up.
Make sure that we don't hear that.
Just making sure that one was good. So, I mean,
Okay.
yeah. And so that kind of leads into the belly, which is time management and student-driven projects, which I think I'm hearing. So definitely having it be like student-initiated, like I would love for them to come in, in the ideal world, come into this makerspace, feel like it's their own studio.
Mm-hmm.
They have this idea. They ask from their teacher, hey, I have this thing. Here's what I want to do, and go do it. And then they take care of the supplies, and they feel like they have ownership over it. And then it's a nice space when they leave, and they come back to it.
Right.
But not that it's a class,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a place where they could get like, hey, I want to go use this, and they get permission to go utilize that. That's my dream, but I don't know how.
Okay.
Like, oh, that would be so much. Like, what do you not touch? What do you touch? Do you get a license for it?
Right.
Okay, and then in the head, I have problem solving
Okay.
and not fearing failure.
All right. And these are mostly notes for me to think about. And Jamie, what we're doing here quickly, so you can maybe try to catch up, is the legs and Jamie's class. Jamie is the one who's nice enough to let us in and interrogate her students that she works with. So this will look somewhat familiar to her, but slightly different. So one leg is teaching strength, something that you think is a teaching strength of yours, something that you want to improve about your teaching or your coaching. One of the arms is your strength as a maker, and the other one is something you want to improve on. The stomach area is one of the challenges or issues that you all have had in terms of trying to incorporate making into schools. And then the head is what you think one of the most important sort of mental capacities is when anyone is making anything. That would be useful. All right. You want to go ahead?
Yes. My name is Jamila Cancel. I teach at the academy in New York. I'm a science teacher, STEM, so I teach physics, chemistry, and math, geometry. So with my case, one of teaching strengths will be being systematic and linear. So one of the things I would like to help my students to grow is to help them grow from setbacks when things doesn't go the way that they like or they think they should go. How do they move on? In terms of making strength, the problem-solving strategies to being creative many times just to make it happen. Making improvements, I have to learn about problem-solving and skills For students, the part of the valley, the challenge is how to obtain equipment and funds for projects. Many times, that's what constrains what we do. And the head area, it's always having the final product idealization. For me, I like to know, have an idea how's it going to look like, or at least like a mental picture of how it should look like.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Christy Bladen from Bloomfield Junior Senior High School, and I am a teacher of multiple things and our school librarian. So, with my little guy, I said the mental part, just starting at the top, was again that it's okay to try and it's okay to fail.
Okay.
So that seemed to be, because I have kids that don't even want to try, so that's a battle just in itself.
Just a quick question. Do you think that they don't want to try because they're afraid of failing, or they just sort of are, they don't really care to do anything?
I have always felt like a lot of it is peer driven. They don't want to look like a fool in front of their friends if they don't get it. Okay. And I get that, so we do try to. My strength is crafting. Okay. We do have we do Make It Take It Mondays. Okay. But my Make It Take It is always crafty or cooking or some kind of, related to that. My improvement piece would be, and kind of my something that I want to improve, I definitely fear the science end of it. Okay. There's a reason I'm a school librarian, and it was because I loved to read and I loved history, and both of those together were a really good fit for me. So I have to say I've been just real hesitant. I've attended some maker things in the past, and I'm the last one that's able to figure out the robot or, that kind of thing, and I don't have the confidence to do that. The other part of that is I don't have the money. Okay. We've been talking about ROI here before. I am definitely trying to move my way into that. Piece of it. They have gotten some grant money, and I had a really good conversation with our ROI leader before I left, because I told her, okay, I'm going to this. Piece together with that is my space is kind of problematic. I have a fear, if anybody's been to Bloomfield, our library is right at the front door, and our office is upstairs, which is a horrible safety concern. Okay. And I'm fearful I'm getting ready to get booted. And I'm not sure where I'm going to land. And so space, right now I've got great space, but I'm fearful of what's coming. Okay.
All right, thank you.
I'm Brock Beeman from Spencer Home Community Schools. In the head, sounds like very similar ideas, but just the willingness to fail, I think, is probably the critical piece here. Okay. And just I think that kids less than adults, but kids and adults have a fear of failure, and some of the best things we can do come out of messing something up and trying it a different way. The strengths that I have are just a very visual, spatial person. Can see how things fit together, and organization is another strength. The areas that want to improve are just vertical articulation of the curriculum, and then encouraging others to jump in, being able to do that. The problem in incorporating makerspace in a school, in my mind, is understanding when it fits in as far as time, where it fits in as far as content area, and how it fits in within that content area.
Okay. And Brock, where did you say you were? I know
I'm
Spencer.
the curriculum director for Spencer Home
You're the
Community
curriculum
Schools.
director. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a bunch of head nods. I thought I heard an amen. Not sure. But, yeah, or at least
Either way, same sentence.
an affirmation. Okay.
I'm Brian Garman from Brown County Junior High School. So I don't teach, so it's what I said is our strength is just that the enthusiasm and interest on our staff for this, I think, is a really important part. It's hard to move it forward if you don't have people who buy in. And it's taken some time. We've been at this for, I suppose, 5 years or so, and it's been taking some time to get people, the kind of people that I want in the building, the people that are enthusiastic about this type of teaching and learning. But we're there now, I think, for the most part, about 99% there. So that's really helpful in moving this forward. I think one of the challenges is really how do you embed that STEM model across all disciplines of learning. We don't see that as something that's isolated to engineering and math and science. We see it as a teaching model that should be implemented across all disciplines of learning. And so how do your social studies people, how do your language arts people, how do they use that same model? Because they often get turned off quickly because they see it as something that you're moving in a direction that really somehow de-emphasizes their discipline. So getting them to buy into that, and I think that's a challenge. I think teaching people how to embed Makerspace into their curriculum is really important. I don't want this to be just a place people visit on occasion. I want this to be a place that is fundamentally part of their curriculum in their classroom, again, across all disciplines. I think one of the things we did when we created our Makerspace that helps that is to create a space that's shared between a collaboration lab and a Makerspace. So that drew a lot of social studies and language arts people in there, who could also then kind of see, hey, that's pretty cool what they're doing over there. I think that sort of helped facilitate that a little bit. Before, the Makerspaces were in science rooms, and so it was seen as something that was exclusively for science or STEM lab class or whatever, was robotics, whatever it would be. I think building the capacity of school leaders is also a really big one. I spend a lot of time anywhere I can go to talk to teachers, because when you're a school leader, you don't live this every day in the classroom. So just listening to people about what are they doing in the classrooms, what challenges do they have, what ideas do they have, and then for me, and my assistant principal, is recognizing what high quality STEM instruction looks like, so that we can evaluate it properly and not be the only. I don't want our instructional coach to be the only person who assists our teachers in developing these skills. I want to be as confident as she is, so that I can do the same thing. And then to me, one of the big keys to this Makerspace is just divergent thinking, teaching our kids that concept. And there's a lot of interesting stuff out there about divergent thinking, how we really suck it right out of kids as they get older.
And prepare them for the test, right?
Right.
Brian, are you the head then of the school?
I'm the principal at the junior high school.
Thank you.
Thank you. As an instructional coach, a lot of what you just said, a lot of what you just said totally mirrors what I'm thinking. I'm Jamie Miller, team coach for RBB, and just kind of reiterating a lot of what people are saying, starting at the top, trying to kind of pick up where you all left off. I had to submit a grant before I was allowed to let myself come down here, so I apologize for being late. I literally had to push submit and then head down here. The mindset, I think for us, the biggest thing that we have grown across all of our buildings is just similarly the growth mindset, and just the idea that our kids, it's brand new to our teachers, right along with our kids, and just the idea of a makerspace is still kind of a novelty, something that great if they have time, or the non-tested grade levels or the non-tested content areas, they have time for it, but those core content area teachers, they just don't have time for it because it's an added bonus. And flipping that lens to the idea that just because it's new or just because it's different doesn't mean that those more core veteran teachers can't adapt and integrate it to their curriculum. So that's a big thing that I've worked on, is just finding those access points for all of those core content areas. That, like you guys said, those humanities teachers have all the same opportunities to incorporate making that the math teacher, or that one passionate STEM teacher, just because they are more confident, I think, like you mentioned,
doesn't mean that they have any more access points than some of the teachers in other content areas. And as far as strengths, I think I always go to that growth mindset because that's something that I kind of bring to the table. I think I'm always willing to learn new things and try new things. I'm kind of the PD junkie that always wants to be learning the new content as well as practices. But it continues to kind of just be the thing that Mrs. Miller's doing. And the classroom teachers are still putting it on me to, at best, model it in their room. And just even getting in their door and finding the time for me to do it has been a feat enough, but to start trying to transfer that onus to them and get that confidence. I had a teacher come back from Hasty, totally reinvigorated, someone that is probably just going to be back where she was 2 years ago, but excuse me, has been an ELA teacher, so she's completely left making and PBL and everything and didn't see it in her classroom, and is excited to try and revisit. So just maintaining that, I think. And with that segueing into improvements, I think I kind of talked about the access points. But for me as an instructional coach, just creating that vertical alignment across the grade levels and finding those common themes so that it's not just something that someone in a particular grade level can find a connection, but hopefully that will inspire teachers in other content areas. We have a lot of momentum in our primary grades where they're not tested yet, and those teachers see the literacy connection. So like our STEM literacy, a lot of those picture book based making concepts learning are happening, but then you get to our intermediate grades where, I Learn Now is a component and it just stops, hook, line, and sinker, it's done. So finding ways to continue that pipeline up through the different grade bands is a big goal for me right now. So I think that's, hopefully I hit on all the body parts.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like I heard a lot of similar things, and some things, interestingly, right, are both strengths and challenges for certain folks. And so time is consistently the number one challenge, right? Whenever I've done work with teachers, and it's I think we call it a legitimate excuse. It is an excuse, but it is 100% legitimate in that you can only pack so much into the day. The reason why I feel like the excuse part is in there is, again, it's legitimate, but I know for many people, they let that be their regular answer to not have to think more critically about how they could be more efficient or make things better, right? Is they'll say, oh, we just don't have enough time. And that's the end of the conversation, rather than, geez, time stinks and we don't have much time, but perhaps if we, jiggle things around, we could find time for this, or maybe this is a better use of time. And so one of the consistent things, and I think Brian maybe hit on this, is one of the ways we've been trying to think of this more consistently is the time issue, again, becomes a completely legitimate excuse if making is another thing in the day that kids are supposed to be able to do. So it's another class that's an add-on. Then yes, how the heck are you going to fit that into the schedule? But we are trying to think of it more as a replacement or a revision of much of the current instructional time. So it's an approach to teaching rather than its own separate class or something like that. So we're hoping that over the next couple months we'll be in sort of pretty significant contact. And one of the thoughts, and we'll sort of build on this, and we'll, like I said, we'll be in touch, but that Julie Marie and I can help us is that as we come back and do stuff like this, is helping to think through what are the challenges that you all are having as you're engaging in this, and then we can think about programming, in a session like this that it's not going to solve the problem, but would help you think about strategies that maybe others are using. In those ways. So that's where this is really helpful. What I wanted to do and what I had been emailing you about is I want to shift into, and I don't know why I printed one portrait and one landscape, but I want to shift into getting you all to think about related to this, but sort of what are your goals? And so this is an exercise that comes from our friends at the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh, who've helped a lot of people sort of walk through these ideas. If you came to a Maker Educator Workshop we did a couple years ago up in Indy, somebody ran a workshop on this. So it might be somewhat of a repeat, but hopefully it's still useful. And what I'd like to do is have you, for a little while at the start, think through how you would respond to some of these statements. So there's a couple prompts on there, and then there's a couple sub-prompts to get you to think about those. This is made for people who are both in schools and out of schools, so some of those prompts may not trigger anything for you because they might be about a library or about a museum or something like that. But if you can go through these and start thinking about how you would respond to each prompt, what we'll do in a little while is I will give you something that sort of brings those responses together. But I don't want you to go to this yet. Related to this idea of being flexible and that things might change, let's write some of these ideas down, and then let's maybe do another round of sharing. And somebody might have the exact same idea, but they might be more poetic maybe in how they say it, or more efficient in how they say it. And so why don't you take a little bit of time to work through these. If you're here with somebody who is from your district or school, and it's useful to think a little bit on your own and then talk with them, go for it. If you want to talk to the person next to you and you're not annoying them, then that's totally fine too. But think through, this is where we want to start asking you to really think about how you're going to, what it is you care about, and how you're going to enact some of those things that you care about. And again, that'll guide some of our work in the next few months, but we want to get you started in thinking about your local area and what this means for you. Does anyone need a pen to jot some notes down on that paper? There's a bucket of pens by Julie Marie. As you're doing this, do you mind if I take a picture of what you wrote on the backside of your
Mm-hmm.
people? If you care, then just sort of put it away. If you don't, then I'll come around and just capture those, and we can come back to those later.
Are we missing 4?
Uh,
I don't have comp 4.
all right. It looks like it got cut off. I will look it up and let you know
Thanks.
what that is. Thank you. So as Julie Marie is writing it up there, basically, prompt 4 is the sort of for whom. Who are you going to serve? Is it a target audience? Is it all? What are their needs? Is there anything specific about that group that you want to assist? Are there multiple groups? I think oftentimes in a school people think of just the students and not other educators in the school as also seeing it as a resource. And that by them seeing it as a resource, then their students may see it as a resource. So in the School of Ed, we see it as, sure, I can get students to come in and faculty will send their students, but I want to get the faculty in there so the faculty are actually thinking about how they can use it. And then if they incorporate it more, then their students are more likely to see it as sort of a natural piece rather than, just a supply closet, so to speak.
From the adults. I don't think there's any adult who feels the student shouldn't try. Yeah, so like I was seeing my number in 2 weeks.
This time, mainly to interest idea.
Collaborating and be creative.
Which is about the same.
Okay, yeah. So it says, I wasn't interested, this is based on, based on our pride in being a PBL school. Because we were proud of being a PBL school.
Shows the stars outside.
We want our students to thrive there.
Like she didn't have to advise anything, and it was running to our girls. So
We see many students who
that was
just who want to just do the easy answers.
I really feeling number 3 too. There's more that we left off for prompt number 3.
They want the Merriman, and we all want
My first read of that was,
content in Merriman, which
we ain't ... It's like,
feeling that's
that's how they. Thank you for writing so neatly compared to my scratch.
presentation.
They actually did this one before this one.
I'm sorry?
This was like the one that I shared with you last night.
Oh,
It was
great.
part 1 before.
I didn't.
No, it was before the attachment. This one. No, this was the one I asked you to print off. Did you put this one
I'm sorry.
from the attachment?
No, I thought you said. I thought you meant for me to print that.
Oh,
I
no.
didn't even see that. Sorry about that.
I prefer Steam, but that.
Do we want to see if they have it? If they can print off 10 copies outside?
Yeah, I can go do that. I should. I might have that. And then these go up on the wall. And I brought this tape. We can do that maybe after they do this. You don't have time to edit this. Do we really want to push it?
I would say if you think that this is helpful.
I think this is more.
Okay.
This was like yes, no, not really like getting it.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
I'll go do this. Why don't you facilitate this conversation?
I think that we are giving this. We have,
Yeah.
If they only take cash, do you have cash? I only have a card.
There's a language. There's a language across our whole school.
Maybe they'll have an ATM. I have an ATM card. Maybe. We'll find out. 10 cents, maybe.
All right, so maybe I'll give you a couple more minutes to think through these. Julie and Marie and I, our wires crossed a little bit. She's got another values mapping grid that will help. But if you can think about these, then we'll collectively share a little bit and see if there's commonalities, and then you can write them out a little more formally.
Yeah. Wait, are you on 2? Okay, good. That's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I see you do that on the permanent shop. It's not something like that. We always do something to cover yourself.
Yeah.
Instead of
Like for you. Yes. That reflects you. Yeah. Yeah, like the self and the agency.
And you talk to them and they tell you. Yeah. They know it's right. Like they're not ready to. They don't know that. So you want to do any
I like the design required for the. When I think of that, so they, if something goes wrong, they know what they are. Systematic, right? Like knowing, like, okay, if I mess up here, what do I do? Right? They know. It's like they know. The next step is they get it wrong, and I feel like that's a learning thing that they really learn. Yeah.
We've said, well, you just know where to go every day.
Right.
That is one matter.
So we have a methodology that knows what they're doing. Yeah. So and that's something we try and really develop in our students. We also try and develop grit and problem solving, agency collaboration, and creativity. Right. Or communication.
But it was, we're home.
I wrote students as community partners. The first community partners in huge.
I never thought about community partners, but yeah, and teachers, I like the comment that I made about, making if like hackerspace, which we do better. Yeah, we expect the students to use it. But also teachers not being afraid that no one's a student. Like, no, anytime use those markers. Like, that was teachers. Right? Yeah, but I don't want any particular part of the school to feel like I don't belong there. Like I can't use that anytime. But I feel that way about my classroom too. And it's certainly no one has no but I mean, I think it's like, yeah, that's part of the, okay, I'm not sure here where they go.
Are they going okay?
It is, yeah.
Who's the new principal?
So creating that system organization,
It's quite active.
Is he out?
Yeah, it's for the
Sure.
Where's the line?
yeah, he's
It will be nice if they return.
I'm assuming because then he just kind of closes it down to doing things. Obviously this first year, but
It's been close enough.
hopefully brings
If you're mess.
some enthusiasm for
My
STEM
sink
and trying to learn.
That's another issue. I was worried like what happens if first year programs. She's the teacher counts for all that. So you have changes in leadership that really disrupt.
It happens, yeah.
So unless you're bored, that's a lot of times.
One board president, so it can be one person, but
Right now,
yeah.
like our board just is like, yeah, this is great, we're really supportive of it, but we'll be at the level of support, leadership.
Sure, right. Or for us, a lot of times it's sure support, but not when it comes down to competing interests. So we think this is great, but when push comes to shove, if it has to,
Everybody does the exact same time. Or everybody
Yeah,
does the exact
actually,
same thing.
I agree.
but she's.
Where's your
I think we
skill
met at
and
the,
where's your interest?
I know we did at
We'll do
the,
that to Rebecca.
it was
It's
like
on
technology.
Yes.
It was up in, yeah.
That's what I
Yeah, because I think it was donated to the school, only for you to say. I'm the
The vote was.
I think so.
So I will over examine.
She moved to Bloomington this year, so they're at PSC now.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So yeah, she commuted for a year and then ended up working. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That's her second.
Why don't we come back together here? And if we start at the beginning, which may make sense.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to share some of your beliefs to the first prompt on there?
We believe students should be creative and have access to all kinds of tools to
Okay.
support the different modes of learning.
Okay. Anyone else go in a different direction?
I just said yes, all children, regardless of demographics or ability level. School, this should be a space that's kind of the great equalizer among those, so it's not just
Okay.
an enrichment piece.
Okay. Any other differences for the we believe?
I think for us, it's also not just opportunities to be innovative and creative and opportunities to be problem solvers, but also opportunities to develop 21st century skills. And
Okay.
we try to embed, communication, global awareness, citizenship, all those things that are identified as things that will help kids be successful beyond just being a problem solver and a critical thinker. Those are huge, but there's a lot of other things too that kids need.
Okay. Agreed. For prompt 2, what do you think about the strengths? What can you build on?
I can share. I
Sure.
can, yeah. I'm just talking about my school specifically. We will have 4 trained STEM fellows in my building.
Okay.
We've got PLTW K-12. We're partnership with ROI, and the high school already has a workplace simulation like manufacturing.
Okay. Right.
And the elementary, that's why I'm here today. We're creating our makerspace right
Okay.
now.
So there's a lot of, what do we want to call that? Sort of in-house expertise that you could leverage.
We're trying, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has it flourished yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is like the 3rd year of building on. So.
Okay. Because this is part of
The
one of
makerspace
go-
is like the last little part. Sorry.
Okay.
As far as at the elementary.
Okay.
And that was kind of like the last little thing that we're getting going here, because we started in on just, getting STEM started into classrooms and just introducing teachers to that. Then we started sending teachers to STEM fellows. And then this year we started the PLTW. We had the training over the summer. Now it's K-12. So it's just slowly we've been rolling stuff out.
Okay.
Makerspace is the next step.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, the reason I ask is one of the challenges that I have seen in working with a number of people is that, or at least just talking to them, is that often one of the things that seems to happen is a school sort of figures the more programs or things that they can say that they have, that sort of solves the problem. But it sort of leads to Jamie's situation of she's the go-to person, but it's still just her, and everyone else is sort of either expecting her to take care of it, expecting that one person who's been trained to take care of it, or saying, well, we've got those kits, but they sort of sit on the shelves.
well, we're not lucky enough to even have an instructional. What's your title again?
Coach.
We do not have one. It is
Okay.
on every
Okay.
teacher to
Yeah, that's
do their
good.
own thing.
That's good.
So yeah, there's no really getting out of it, and there's no pushing it off on anybody else.
Okay.
I mean, every teacher has to. Everybody's doing PLTW.
Yeah.
PLTW.
Okay.
Everybody.
Are you at Lagodi?
Mhm.
Okay, I thought
Yeah.
so. I think
Yeah.
we met because you all came to visit,
Yeah.
thinking you had no idea what you were doing, only for us to, quite frankly, say, y'all have it together way better than you think you do.
I think we're
so
kind of starting to figure that out as we
my
travel
question
around. But
was for you. One of you guys in leadership roles mentioned, I think you did, when you have that 1% or that one teacher who is a. Do you have any of those pockets now?
Oh, yeah,
because
I
yours
mean,
was really
yeah,
kind of a grassroots approach.
Right,
You
right.
guys did it kind of bootstrap style, but it was
There-
also a
there
directive,
are-
wasn't it?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's no
So
opting
I'm just
out.
wondering if you have any
Yeah,
people
there
that
are
have
some
tried to
teachers
opt
that
out.
are not so much saying like I'm not doing that or I'm opting out or you know whatever. They're just overwhelmed.
Sure.
I was just talking with Shannon Birch, and which her children went to Lagodi, so we,
Okay.
but it is overwhelming because we have taken on so much in the past, really 2 years, majorly. So you know, for some people, it is a lot. So I just see overwhelming, like overwhelmed people. They're wanting to do the Magnified Learning training this summer yet, and I think people are going. We're at our fill, like
Sure.
the PBL, like it was going to be mandatory next year. Everybody had to do one PBL. The STEM fellows were already doing that for that class, but like they were saying everybody, and people are just like saying like we're drowning. Like you've got to give us time. So I think that's our only like concern right now is getting that across to the administrators. Like, hey, like
Slow down.
we gotta slow down a little bit. Like
It's kind of like you said, you've got so many things going on. It looks good.
but it's getting overwhelming. Yeah, a little bit overwhelming for a
Well,
lot.
and it's
without a lot of the training.
I mean, with any of these, right? Like, so what the research says about good PD is that good PD requires consistent follow-up. You all, I'm sure, know that. But it also takes time for people to sort of work through
yeah.
and see how it's going to actually fit, right? And
Right.
so we ran a big training last summer at IU for maker educators, and now what we're hearing from many of them is, yeah, now that I've been doing it for 6 to 7 months, now now I know what I don't know, sort of thing.
Right.
Like before that, you said do this, or this is a good suggestion, and I just said yeah. Now I've tried that or something like that, and now I know, oh, that's not going to work for us.
Yeah.
So now I know the questions that I should have asked you, that type of thing. And so I think there's absolutely a truth and a validity to these things do take time to emerge, and that's where I think there's a lot of value in not being the only person, because it's a collective effort in moving forward, and somebody might have tried something you didn't try, but they might also have experience or an idea, and they are also thinking in this way.
Yeah.
Because it really is a shift in thinking about how you're going to run those classes.
Yeah, nobody feels left
So-
out.
Right.
But you make a really
No.
good point,
Right.
because
Yeah.
I think leaders, we sit in the office, or we develop these visions. It's sort of like, it's a military campaign, this is our objective over
Right.
here, but we're not the boots on the ground doing it. So we don't always understand kind of that process and the difficulty to get there. So someone has to actually accomplish this. And so it's good because I've had that same thing. It's like, okay, we need just to slow down, and you need to listen to the staff and slow down a little bit,
Right.
because otherwise you'll alienate people, or people will jump off the bus, so to
Right.
speak. They won't get back on once they
Right.
do. And so it is kind of, you have to go kind of slow with that.
I
One of
agree.
the things we talk about is that the leadership is, can be one of your, is a huge strength if you have great leadership. And I'm talking about like central office and school board leadership, but it can also real quickly become a detriment
Right.
if that changes. And I feel like we're always on that, if we have a superintendent who is really, really supportive in the school board right now, but that can change quickly
Right.
if they leave. And how do you keep that momentum, and if that change in leadership happens?
Right.
And so, sustaining it, and then getting back to the professional development that Adam's talking about, that, we've had that model of professional development. I've been at this for a long time. It's always been like piecemeal together. We send someone to a conference here, there,
Right.
they come back, they share. But to be really systemic change requires saturation. It requires a comprehensive look at it. It requires a really consistent exposure to it over and over and over. And so we got, Warsaw. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Warsaw schools. Yeah, they got really interesting. So we really have been following this model from them because they've been at this for about 13 years, I think. And their thing is to saturate a building and then build from there. And so our superintendent went to China here recently, and she met and got to be good friends over the time with that superintendent there. So that's what we're doing now is this 6-year strategic plan, saturate a building at a time for 2 years, and that's where I've been in contact with Adam to help us do some PD. Because we kind of went and built this framework for STEM, but I feel like the piece we missed a little bit was building the capacity of our teachers to become high-quality STEM teachers at all levels, all disciplines. So that's we're kind of stepping back a little bit and saying, okay, now we've got all these programs, but how do we help people become really high-quality teachers and utilize what we give them?
Have to be our next step.
One thing that y'all have kind of danced around is this theory about professional development, and Adam, you leaned into it, but I thought you were going to go there and you didn't. But theorists say that PD isn't successful until you have a chance to customize it. So first you're like, what you're saying, you're like figuring it out.
Yeah.
But then if you jump into the next thing, you never get to customize it for your own self.
Right.
And then if you don't make it your own, then it's not in your tool belt, it's just out floating around, right? It's just an idea.
Jeremy, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's what Magnify Learning's model of PBL. Not that you need one more layer of PD
I
right
already
now,
had
but
it because the STEM
yes,
fellows,
sure,
they're
they're
for
right.
everybody.
It just kind of broadened the lens to bring those teachers in the peripheral that already said STEM doesn't apply to me. I'm not a math teacher. I'm not a science teacher.
Yeah.
And it made it applicable to all the content areas. And it really was the kind of the design thinking lens. It really just it came down to, you don't have to be, creating a prosthetic for this biomedical module. You can be, creating a fundraiser because you see this need in a community and you're truly just using your standards and your content to meet a need. And it just really broadened that lens for us. So maybe that'll help.
I think there's a lot of vocabulary thrown around as well that mean the same things to, like you get it from not just the administration in the building, but you were talking about how, like, I'll say upper management, they're like, oh, now you need to be on STEM, and oh, now you need to be on PBL, and they're like, wait, you're talking about basically the same thing. And do you really mean the same thing, or how much do you really want these to look different? And making sure that's clear, because I think one of the things about making that clear to your staff is going, okay, so we're gonna call this also STEM. It's basically the same thing you were just doing because you're amazing staff, and I love you guys. And use this word. In our building, we do New Tech Networks model of PBL. So they bought into, a long time ago, they bought into the kind of the package. And the one thing that, and I did my master's in PBL in the arts program, and that was one of the things that really drove me to pick this school, that I like about the environment that we have is there is a consistent vocabulary across our entire school. We know any student after the first month of being at our school knows what an entry document is. They know what a need to know is, and they know what a critical friends is. And that is every classroom, there is a consistent vocabulary. Even if you are working in completely different projects, completely different goals or driving questions, there is a consistent vocabulary, and all of the staff use it. They use them a little differently. I mean, my critical friends experience doesn't necessarily look like Jamila's critical friends, and we tweak it a little bit, and I certainly think that's something that the students need when they're also going to go to college, where each classroom is going to be completely different, have different expectations, so that helps. But I think that that's one of our real strengths in the school that we have is all across the board, our teachers have a desire to have this project learning, and we all share the same vocabulary.
Yeah,
Would you agree? Like, yeah.
and I would say that's one of the ways to help, right? Is if you're so having a great group and multiple people on board, I think is a strength. If you don't have that, it's figuring out how you get there. If you do have that, one of the ways to get it forward, I think, is something like consistent vocabulary, consistent support. If it's planning time, right? Some of those other supports that people will need to do that. As one other example, this guy's he's now actually moved from St. Louis to teaching in Indy. So you might see him in certain circles. But one of the things that this guy, Andrew Gooden, was talking to us about a while back, we have a project looking at failure and what happens when kids fail. And one of the things that he had started at his school was common language around failure and revision and iteration. And so he said it was really sort of magical that within a year, that kids and other faculty in the school were using this common language. So they were talking about, revision, iteration. This is a draft. So everything was sort of draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, even on faculty memos, right? But this, sort of embedding this notion of nothing is ever final. These are all just various versions of where we are. And he said when everybody got on board with that, then it was really infused. And like you said, there might be slightly different versions of how everyone interprets that, but the commonality in using that language, rather than people saying, I've talked to people who I'll say, so we think inquiry is good. They're like, well, we're not really inquiry, but we're doing problem-based learning. And I'm like, pretty sure that's the same. It's at least headed in the same direction, pretty much the same thing. But so that can be really, an important thing, and it's very simple. But especially as computer science comes and advances, right? This idea of people wanting to jump to sort of the flavor of the month. And this is where I think making has staying power, so to speak, and inquiry has staying power. Is again, it's not the flavor of the month. It should be sort of what's underlying all of that. And I've never talked to an educator who has said that kids solving problems is not the main goal of what they want. And not even kids, right? I mean, even our university students. Almost everyone will say, I want them to be able to solve problems. Those problems might be, or the way that they might solve those problems might be more through writing or through statistical analysis or through other types of communication. But it's usually about solving problems. And so breaking it down into some of that common language can be really important and make everyone realize that they're on the same page even when it seems like they may not be. So I think that's important. Let's move on to prompt 3. The we aim to. So what this is sort of, pardon me if you're vegan or vegetarian, but this is sort of the meat of it, I think. What is it that you actually really are thinking about doing? Does anyone want to share what you wrote there? And again, I'm assuming that this is different based on building, based on your position, those types of things. So that's okay.
We have a lot of pockets of greatness right now. So we've had the PBL training, we've had the small cohort of PLTW training, but we're working now on those concepts being adaptable, like I said before, across all content areas. So for us, we have a new construction makerspace underway right now. We have footers and maybe a wall by the end of the week. But in that space, it's going to serve 1,300 students, K-5, so it has to be adaptable. So for us, it's just a space for authentic critical thinking, and that's not even just solving problems, but just recognizing problems, being able to identify and decompose what is a problem versus a solution, and what problems work with what solutions. So just that space for flexibility, quite literally flexible seating and grouping and collaboration, to the more figurative definitions, and pardon me. So just the authentic critical thinking is kind of the end game for us right now, and just identifying problems and solutions. And
okay.
How does that work, like in the school system? Like, do teachers have a time they go in
It's a
there?
great great question. We taught STEM classes for the first year. So I taught 650 kids a week for the first year, and it was a hot mess. And that's where we kind of got ourselves into that rut of Mrs. Miller just teaches STEM, and we've had to undo some of that and empower the teachers. And so year 2, pardon me, I modeled in the classrooms a lot more and pushed in, so there wasn't really anyone in my classroom then. They checked the room out, and that was about it, because I was out in the classroom. So now we're trying to find the balance. Again, the primary classrooms use that makerspace classroom way more right now because they do a lot more of just the literacy-based challenges and the consumables and not simple, but more basic build challenges and things like that. They're making a lot with just consumable materials. We're hoping there'll be some specialty pieces with PLTW where some priorities use the space more than others, but we're also grant funded in our positions, the coaches. So we have this year and then one more full year guaranteed, and that's it. So that was one of the questions I came with today. Just existing maker spaces in the school space. I'm curious because our junior high and high school, our spaces are outfitted, but without a full-time staffer in there, they're sitting a lot more than we would like. So great question, because now we'll have the same problem next year at our elementaries where if we don't build our teachers up to be able to use the space independently, if we disappear and our positions go away, it's going to be a whole lot of greatness just sitting.
Does your school librarian have?
We have library assistants, so they're already stretched. We have one librarian for the district at the high school, and she's retired this year. So currently we don't technically even have a librarian for the district. So she dabbled, our librarian at the high school, and had a pretty cool little space. But we're going to have the spaces in every building and just not the manpower. So
I think that's a big issue because you've got to train whoever's going to use it, whether it's students or teachers, how to use the materials in there and how to use them properly so they can continue being used. And then creating a sense of ownership over that space by the people who intend to use it, that's both the staff and the students. And I think, I think of it kind of like a library of stuff that everybody should feel very proud to go in and use. But how do you develop the training? How do you develop I mean, as an art teacher, I struggle. I have currently closed my paint center because a whole bunch of people used the stuff and didn't put it away. So guess what? It will be opened again when it gets cleaned up. And I'm not pointing fingers, it's just going to happen. And I want it to be used, but I need it to be taken care of. And so having scaffolding the usability of it.
we're hoping to use our space in the out of school time as well with families as a connection piece there to bring parents in. But same thing, you have to build all those same capacities in parents. If we say, come use power tools with your kids on Wednesday night, we're gonna have bigger problems. So the scaffolding, that was where our superintendent said, hang on a second, there's a table saw sitting in the office right now. Can you guys give me a little more background information? We're hoping to build the exact same scaffolding for families to feel confident doing all the same things.
Okay. There's so much to talk about. Let's jump on this to the why you think it's important, Prompt 5. And then I think I might transition to Julie Marie with the grid. What are some of the reasons, maybe other than some of the things that we threw out up there, as just important things, problem solving, that type of thing? What are some of the reasons why you think why you're here today, why somebody might have said, yes, you can go to this. Why is it that you think that this actually has value above and beyond what you're already doing? You know, I'm sure you're all working hard with your kids already. So what is it that you think this type of approach to education can do?
And you mean not the space, but the pedagogy, making pedagogy.
Right. Why even get involved in this?
See, to me, it's all about economics. I mean, it's about what our kids deserve, and that is for us to prepare them for the 21st century economy.
Okay.
We are not preparing kids for an industrial age economy anymore, where that type of teaching was okay. I mean, we have quite a few corporate partners. We have about 6 or 7, and every time I go visit them, they say to me all the time, there's not a job here that our people don't need to be able to think and problem solve. And we need you to teach this way. And this is what helps us.
Okay.
And so to me, it's there's that direct link. I mean, I understand that's to me, that's always been the best way to teach kids. But there is a direct link to making sure our kids are prepared to access the jobs that are available. And we all know that 80% of those jobs are going to require them to be able, more than 80% are going to be STEM. You're going to be able to think and problem solve to be able to access those jobs.
Okay.
So to me, that's a big factor in it. I want our kids to be able to leave. What I really love is for our kids to leave our high school and be ready, job ready right now. I mean, to go right into all these advanced manufacturing jobs that are available, and just walk right out and be so marketable that people want to hire them, and then we'll just train them or we'll send them to school. But they're so desirable because of the way that they've been educated that we feel like we want those kids.
Okay.
You have some in Nashville, but they would be more in Columbus, right?
We have no manufacturing in the county.
Oh, there's not any
No.
at all.
Most of it's state
Columbus?
national forest. Yeah, Columbus. So Cook, Crane is everybody's STEM part. They're really great, but they're not as engaged. Cook's Medical's amazing. Forcia, Cummins, Toyota, LHP Engineering, Columbus Regional Hospital. Those people are super engaged, but they have a vested interest in this. They can't find workers, and the workers are sitting right there in the school. So they're very interested in being involved in what we're doing.
Well, but at the same time, it goes beyond a more a more utilitarian view, right? Because it's not that they're saying, yeah, you know, we need more line workers, and they just need to know this thing,
Right. No.
right? They're teaching them problem-solving skills. So the way that I hear of it, I kept thinking problem-solving is sort of the key, but it seems like it's a coupling of problem-solving and learning how to learn.
Yeah, because
Right,
they
that if they're ready-
don't need just this one thing like
Right.
they did in the industrial
Right.
age, where they sit them on an assembly line, and
Right.
they're saying that's what they don't need. And so they're saying that they need an educational system that prepares kids to be able to make decisions and problem solve, because they don't really have jobs that are cut out of that mold anymore.
Right.
Those jobs don't really exist. Man, and if anybody's ever been to if you haven't visited a manufacturing facility for a while, people ought to go. It's phenomenal. I mean, the difference today between when I was a kid and I would go visit, like on manufacturing day, and your family would invite you in, and when you were a kid and you get to go see them build tires or something. It is so different today, and it's eye-opening.
Cook Medical is a good one to go to.
What's that?
Cook Medical is
Cook's
a
a
good
good
one to
one.
go to.
Cummins is a good one. Forcia, it's just amazing what these people do now.
Okay.
We also know that there's more than one right answer, and the students need to feel it, like there's other ways to solve these problems, multiple ways to present their knowledge. And our biggest struggle right now is the students just want to give us the easy answer. Just tell me what you want. I'm like, no. Tell me, do it. You be you. Do it. And they want just answer A, B, C, or D.
And our most gifted students are the worst ones. They want you. They
Like, give
just,
me the rubric so I can do the bare minimum.
They want you to
Like,
show
that's
them
not
how to get
it
from
works.
point A to point B. And they don't want to have to struggle, and they struggle when they struggle.
Yeah. So that is something that, again, you are all more on the front lines than I am, but from my 30,000-foot view, one of the things that we do consistently hear as whether it's faculty or teachers or anyone else, who educates, embarks on inquiry, there is a lot of pushback. And the story we've heard from other faculty as they have tried to shift their entire department is the pushback happens at first until they realize that they can't get away from it. That it's a consistent, right? It's not just Miss Miller's class. It's, oh my gosh, this is happening everywhere. Like all of my teachers are asking me to take ownership for my learning. Now, there's some benefits that come along with it, with some more of the agency and control and those sorts of things. But you know, we even see this at IU where it's the same thing. Like, I'm uncomfortable with this. Just tell me what the best way is to do this so that I'm getting the grade. You know, tell me what it is I need to do. And it's like, hey, when you're out in your own classroom, some people might tell you how to do it, but you're essentially on your own to figure this out. So it's not helpful for me to tell you. And so we've consistently heard that people have pushback until the kids get into it. And usually, even though it's harder for them, most of the time they turn around and they realize that it's actually more impactful. Right? That they have learned how to be a better student, how to be an independent thinker, and those sorts of things. And so it's one of those where you sort of have to just stick with it, and ideally most people are on board so that they can't escape it, so to speak, and it doesn't become just like, oh, I hate this class because this is the class that makes me have to think. That they are getting that everywhere, and they're learning to access those resources and think about how to solve problems.
And the stick isn't always the most, I mean, it can be effective to motivate people, but I thought that the governor's 6-year strategic plan was an absolute great leverage point for us, because our superintendent put out our 6-year plan right after he unveiled his. And when we went up there to see that, I thought this is exactly the kind of leverage that we need, because now our teachers see that not only is this a corporation initiative, it's a state initiative. And if you read that plan very closely, it says it's pretty definitive. I mean, 100% in 6 years of Indiana schools will have all staff trained and will embrace the philosophy of STEM instruction on this STEM instructional model. That's pretty powerful, and it gives you some leverage, I think, when you start to say, because people do want to sort of hide. What I hear, people think it's a passing fad. It's here today, and it's just like something else. It'll be gone tomorrow. And if I just wait it out long enough, resist it passively enough, it'll eventually go away and they'll quit hassling me about it. That is what some people think.
Yep.
But it's not going to go away. All you got to do is listen to when they unveiled it up at the State House, when there's some big hitters that are involved in this STEM strategic plan, that these people aren't just going away. I mean, these people are
it's the whole new plan now.
Right.
I forget, we just had a training on that last week. I mean, our whole thing now, when they come into high school, they have to choose like a PBL or like they have to have a pathway.
The graduation pathways, yeah.
So I mean, it isn't going away. The state has changed. I mean, you have to. So yeah, it's not going away.
Right, and I mean, listen, and I don't see that changing even in the leadership at our state. I mean,
right.
I just think that's going to be here for quite a while.
As you said, it's the way the world's changing. It's the economy. We're talking the other day about I'm going to mess up the quote now, but literacy in the 21st century isn't about reading and writing. It's about learning, unlearning, and relearning. And just the idea that let that sink in for a second. I can see your wheels turning. Just the idea that we're preparing them for jobs that they're not going to have for their entire life. It's not going to be a career that they go into and work their way through for the next 40 years. They're going to change. I mean, even just my generation, people are changing jobs and changing entire fields. And they have to be adaptable. They have to unlearn and solve as problems evolve.
I agree. Do you want to?
Yeah.
To continue this conversation and talk about our priorities, we have this values mapping grid. And what we want you to do is to read through all of those little phrases underneath NA, K, and E, and then choose the 3 that you feel most strongly about that really connect with your own thinking about maker-centered learning and making in general. And
we'll make sure to send all these resources as well, so that if you mark these up, we can, or if you want to do this with your own staff or other teachers, you can
So choose the 3 letters, or choose the 3
Choose
numbers
the
of each letter.
like bingo,
Boxes.
exactly 3 boxes. And then once you've identified your 3, come up here and find them. They're organized differently up here, but come up here and find them. And then, if you will, just put some kind of a mark here into a hashtag if you want.
3 under each letter or 3 all? Like,
3 all
total?
together.
3 all, yes. Okay.
It's kind of hard. It took us a little while to go through it because there's so many options. But what resonates the most with you in terms of why making is important? You want to see those?
And then ultimately they're categorized by those things.
I see.
And then it's kind of a cool conversation because you think about which statements help you prepare for your principals and superintendents, which ones help you with some of your support staff, which ones straight up teaching the librarians, university coaches, whatever. And then like how can making be infused through all of those ideas, right? Or like, okay, what about for me is I'm always thinking this, but if I start partnering with makers who do this, my pedagogy expands.
Well, also, yeah, are there tensions
Yeah.
in crossing this boundary?
Yeah. Read
We've got 3 permanent markers up here. You can hashtags that. It's not happening. Do your best.
I'm not sure how you prioritize.
Teacher for half my administrative lessons. I just continue to walk those ones.
You're an instructional coach, you still, it's a lot of it's, you're still seeing this from a different perspective.
The more positions we eliminate, the broader my responsibilities stay going, but there are days where I want to say,
We've had
still
a
a
lot of
teacher.
time to get these guys to convince to go from a part-time instructional coach to full-time.
Mm.
It's great for, that's helpful.
Well, that's
You just write something that identifies.
I think you just put a tally mark on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the ones that you.
Right, thank you.
Yep.
And because the teachers need that knowledge, is, the person that evaluates them is not the ideal person that they're helping them develop. And even as much as I can make that a benign, non-threatening experience, it's really hard for teachers to take. If they make a mistake, it's very valuable. If they trust the instruction.
There's a very obvious observation as a teachable moment, and then they try something new, and they try, but it 100% comes down to whether they have the personality to trust the administrator or if they don't. So you're absolutely right.
We need to really change
Yeah.
What is that? Oh, you were on modified rides. I don't know you guys. Are you on tap or rides?
Rode our own yet.
Modified rides or tap?
Tap.
So we need to redo some work on ours because it's just doesn't align very well with what we're trying to do. We've known it for a while. Just get
Sure. Yeah.
And you're just high school, is that right?
If you're able to mention hashtags, get those up there, and we'll unpack this quickly
Right now, that's just what I do.
before our
So they
next
can bring
steps.
they can bring their lunch,
Uh-huh.
and they can come and do whatever project is.
Uh-huh.
And we
Hash
have,
marks.
Right.
When you say
We have a
hashtags,
homeroom
I'm
period.
picturing people writing whatever their own
So-
personal Twitter handle is up there. Like, okay, I guess I've not seen that done before, but we can do that.
Thank you for saying that.
No, it's fine.
So anything made
It's
that-
like the kids calling and the
So a
house.
lot of
Oh,
so
well, that's
for Valentine's
hashtags.
Day, we make it take it Monday to Wednesday. So Valentine's Day, we did cupcake decorate.
Uh-huh.
So that was a thing, we got to pick a flavor, and then we have all these stations set up for that. Those kinds of things.
Yeah,
really
mix
really-
it up.
Because that was
We've done
M1.
T-shirt designs. we've done,
This was M1.
No, I didn't peek yet to
Oh my
see if I
goodness,
was.
we've made
Line that was.
a lot of holiday type things, you know, to go along with that.
Uh-huh.
So mine is, as much as anything, like I said, it's typically crafting,
Uh-huh.
but it's you know, the things that come, just
Oh, I bet,
you
yeah.
know, because it's fun. My thing is, this is fun.
Adam, our staff is super excited about you guys coming
We
over.
just look Chromebooks.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, when I sent that out, they were all like,
That's always.
great, we're excited.
Okay.
Not a single person said anything, but couldn't wait. And so, Dr. Hammock's going to be there too.
Okay.
She said she's going to sit in one of the sessions. So
Okay. I'm going to connect with one of the guys
Yeah.
who helps me run the summer thing. We'll be in Austin for South by Southwest the weekend before that. So he's going to take some time
Their
to
schedules are so
look through
I think it'll be great. And you know, this is the first time we've had sort of that makerspace has been available to like everybody. Before they were the science people basically used them.
You've seen at the bottom of this
So
sheet.
I just think it'll be for science and stuff. It'll be about
There are different
opportunity. They have
categories.
to
Yeah.
think outside the
And
box
I've
for some of the other stuff.
arranged those
So
categories by
think about
color.
using
We just
Okay.
allow it to.
So
be
you can
open
see the pink
and, you know,
Our statements about social justice and equity, making for that purpose. The green, our purposes related to workforce development. The beige, our skill development. And then that yellow are related to learning. So if you look at where you fell as an individual, did yours mostly fall under one category, or did you have some breadth in your reasons?
And there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
So that.
See how there's a little code there at the bottom if you turn it upside down, if you don't want to use the colors.
Mine were.
I have a hard time with the social justice. I think it's been a lot more.
Shannon, what were you?
I had one in social justice, one in workforce, and one in learning.
Okay, so you had a broad perspective of how
Yeah.
making,
I guess. I guess I did.
give them points
Yeah.
of making through all of those lenses. Okay. Any other folks want to share on that?
2 skill development and learning.
2 skill development, and what was the other?
And a learning.
And a learning. And as an art educator, does that resonate with what you thought you'd be?
Probably. I mean, I had more that I was like, yeah. But, you know, all over the board. And a lot of them felt a little repeating.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Connected?
I'm like, yeah, okay. I think this is works a little bit more.
And I heard you mention that social justice wanes in importance depending on your audience and where you live.
I think
And I totally agree with that.
a makerspace isn't going to make or break that. It's
Mhm.
going to be your school or your corporation that's going to be able to provide that or not.
Sure.
It's like if you have that, it's going to help anybody who's all socioeconomical within that community, but that's a lot different than two different corporations and very different.
It may or may not be the leading need that it's meeting.
Right.
I feel like
For
yeah.
somebody who's really worried about feeding themselves, it's, you know, or their family is really in hard times, it's gonna feel like, ugh.
Is it Christy? Is that right?
Yes.
Christy, where'd you fall?
Well, I was all over the place, and I kind of was surprised that I was all over the place because I think, you know, I have this vision of like what my role in the school is, and kind of all of these pots of Project Lead the Way, and then, you know, all these other things, and then there's me who's trying to do, you know, this other thing. So I kind of thought that I was going to be, and I was just telling her, you know, one of my biggies, and most of mine comes at lunch when we do it, because that's when I have the free time to do it. I teach 2 other classes, and that's when kids can come on their own, and during our homeroom period. And it's always been, for me, just I just feel like they are their noses are in a Chromebook all day long, and they don't get, you know, and especially the ones that are on these now pathways of dual credit and all this stuff, and it's just constant. They don't have that creativity and the hands-on type things. So I thought that's where mine would all be. I was surprised to see it be that way. So.
And Brian, before we started this conversation, you were talking about being in the green, as your sweet spot. Did that end up resonating when you tried to prioritize?
I had one. I didn't have any in the M, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I had some that I liked, but not the top ones.
And when you ended up over here, I think I saw you only do one hashtag in the greens.
Which is that's
It's
the
all
workforce development.
coded. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
workforce
had
development.
just one there.
Yeah.
And some of them are so similar that they kind of seem like they're.
Just to kind of wrap this up, if you wanted to do this with teachers or with administrators, or even with parents, right? Like getting those parents and talking about it. What I love about it is that making has all of these different sort of spokes and, you know, purposes. And I think the strength in a school is that we do come at it with different, you know, purposes. Typically when I design units, I'm thinking about social justice and equity almost every time. But when I start connecting and co-planning with the workforce development people who are really thinking about that, it sort of expands and stretches how I approach a unit or how I approach a lesson, and really gives me some more depth in what I'm doing. And so it helps me, you know, as a collaborator.
Well, I think it's important, you know, I assume all of you play some role in helping others in your building or in your district think about these things, right? You can imagine that it's not that, this does not say that the ideal maker educator is all of this.
That's right.
Right? But in your district or your building or whatever your sort of unit of analysis is, that as long as you're covering many or most of these across those people, then that's probably a good situation. If everybody is aligned in certain areas or there's bigger gaps, then that's probably a problem. And so thinking about that, and you know, and we also think about, of course, the sort of educational ecosystem, so even beyond school, and how these needs might be getting met. But yeah, I think a lot of people enter this with there's a certain right answer, right? We do what our kids do. But it's not so much that as much as it is that this type of education, again, I think because it's often embedded in real world authentic issues, it should look like the real world, and it should represent the challenges of the real world, but also sort of the opportunities that are there. And I think that, you know, thinking of making in this way can help you think of that. And I think the important part of these activities overall is, you know, can you put, I'm going to just point to that, right? Can you put something on the wall that says, and I don't need to add any value to that or not, but that says, you know, sort of your value statement for making? Yeah, you probably can come up with a nice witty statement that says something, but that's not really the important part. It's trying to think about what it can actually do and how that's going to be embodied. Right? So saying we have a sign in our makerspace that says, everyone is welcome to come in here and make. So we have purposely made attempts to try to do that they're represented in people offering workshops, but that literally the door is open so that they can come in and do this, because that's been one of our challenges is people have walked by the space and think that it's a fancy space that sort of somebody else owns or controls, and so they haven't felt welcome. So trying to figure out ways that we can welcome them. Having people actually in there making so that they can see other people make, having people of different sexes and colors and all those sorts of things so that it's not just a sign on the wall. And then me being in there doing what they would expect, working on electronics or something that looks like it's unapproachable. But, people are working on sewing machines, people are gluing things together, they're adding beads to a string, they're doing those types of things so that they can feel welcome there.
I think it's also learning about how to code switch and build allies. I mean, Tommy Hilfiger wasn't necessarily a maker lover right in the beginning, but I knew what he cared about, and I knew how making connected to that. And so I was able to use the language, right, to build allies in my community and with my teachers.
Yeah, and so thinking, right, using some more teacher language, whether you are familiar with backward design or not, right, this notion of if you set some goals, and I think that's the way I envision vision statements and those types of things, is it puts something out there that's sort of a goal. It might be an ideal, but it's a goal, and we didn't get to it at the end, which is usually where I spend sort of most of my time thinking in my daily life, is what does success look like, or how do we measure, you think that it's doing this. So, right, going back to this is from a project where we think that this project is moving the needle on getting kids, and particularly girls, to consider engineering and understand more about it. So we're trying to come up with ways that actually give us some data that we can make a judgment. Is it working? Is it not working? But I think that sometimes when you are able to write some of these things down, that's the piece that I can't say it matters most in education, but it's definitely a critical piece, which is is it working? So we talked a lot today about creating kids who are flexible thinkers, problem solvers, they're open to taking risks, right? So that's one of the things we can maybe leave you with as you drive back to wherever you're driving to, is thinking about what does that actually look like? How would I know in 2 years' time if I took a graduate from our school, how would I actually be able to sort of measure in some way that they are better at these things that we've said in here are valuable? It's not easy, and we're happy to help you think through that, and we definitely haven't solved that, so I apologize for that. But it's really important to think through, and a lot of those answers might be local. Right? They might not be something that all of your schools would use. I bet there's some that would branch across the schools. But some of those might be very local, that you, for your students, this is what success in those areas looks like. Yeah, so why don't we stop there? We're 2 minutes over. What we will do is we'll be back in touch. I know March might be a little challenging with spring break and those sorts of things, but we'll be back in touch about trying to figure out what those next meetings might look like. Initially, Julie Marie and I were thinking that they'd be a little bit more content focused, that I might lead some stuff about STEM and she might lead some of the literacy stuff. And I think there's times where some of that might make sense to separate, some of it might make sense to keep together. But if there are other things like talking through a little bit of this more, or at some point we'd probably have something about assessment and measurement and those types of things. If there are certain things that come to mind, or if you were disappointed with today or anything, let us know, because really our whole intent over this next time is to really help you in whatever way that we can, to try to think about this and be a sounding board, and ideally, right, you'll also see each other as a resource for that too.
Is there a way that when you send out for the next meeting time, you can give the topic of what you're thinking that you might discuss at that meeting?
Yeah, I think so.
and is there any chance that it can sometimes be about like how to organize the space, how to set one up, how to incorporate that into your day if there's not like a set, like it's not a special class, it's
Okay.
it's a room that the teacher themselves take the students to,
Okay.
like things like that, like
Logistics. Okay.
organizing supplies. If a student, like I know this is one of our things that we're trying to like wrap our head around, like say a kid comes in and they're making something and then it's time to leave. Well, our area is not huge. So like where do they keep that? Or, where do you store things like that? Like I feel we're like kind of at the basics. We're trying to like figure all the logistics stuff out.
Pretty much everyone
so we just
is.
need ideas of like
Yeah.
about all
Yeah.
of that.
Okay.
You guys have a library?
We do.
Is it still a library?
It won't be next year. So
So
we're
you're
totally
thinking around the right
remodeling.
line.
I'm sorry.
So that's good thinking.
Yeah.
Because we
So
just gutted our library.
Yeah.
It's a huge space. And
Well, our library is going to move,
That's
so
what we
it's
did.
moving down into a different area. It's going to be like a media/makerspace area. I think it will have some books.
You'll
Just
say,
think,
No,
oh
and so that's a good question because so we just took our library
no! Yeah.
and it was a big, huge space in the center of the building. We moved our library to a large old science room. It had access points to the language arts room. So our language arts teachers love it because the kids can
Right.
walk right in there. And then we created classroom libraries. So our health teacher has a health library in his room. Our social studies teachers have social studies libraries in their classrooms. So their resources are accessible right there in their classroom. So we didn't get rid of anything. We just kind of redesigned it where it is in
Right.
the building.
Okay.
And so our library became a much smaller space, but we didn't get rid of anything.
Yeah.
And the teachers like it because they can pull books right off. Like the health teacher goes over and pulls what he wants right off the.
So what about at your grade school? Like I'm talking K through 4 at my building. Do they have a library, or are they also like?
They do, but they're gonna figure that out for themselves because their maker spaces
Yeah.
are coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're gonna figure out where they're gonna put it.
Yeah. So I know that's information that
Okay.
like they sent me today. They're trying to get all this because
Yep.
over the summer we're doing new construction. They're trying to come up with all of these. And I'm probably scaring her to death.
Yes.
Actually, I mean, it's
everything.
different models are great for librarians.
Not
so.
just one model, but what are the multiple
ideas.
models? What are the multiple models that could, because
Yeah.
that might not work. That might work for some situations,
Right.
but not might work for others. But so having several ideas of how well it works this way here, and it works this way here, and it works this way here.
So let me ask you this, because we tried this with our group from the summer and it did not work.
Oh no. Okay.
But that's just, and we were asking, I think, at the beginning of the year, and right, there's problems with that. Would it work for you all to do, because I think that there's value in this, and when anyone else has done it and you watch these, it's actually really valuable. Whatever space you have either set aside for making or is currently has making going on, would you be open to doing a little bit of a video walkthrough and sharing that, and we can share that with everyone, and then we can maybe again make organization and those types of things one of the foci of a future meeting? Because we don't.
Adam's distribution list.
Yeah, there
email
definitely isn't one
distribution
model.
list.
And,
Are you in Adam's email
Yeah,
distribution
yeah.
list? Okay.
and what I've seen is that that very few spaces even come close to looking alike, and so it's often the like one person has an idea for this that you want to grab, and another person has this idea, and so we were going to do it a certain way, and then this guy Joel from up in Indy, he did it. He was the first person in Indiana of our network to do it, and he really did a nice job where he essentially just like walked around with his iPad and he's like, "And we have it this way." And then as people watched, they're like, "Oh my God, that's so helpful to see just how he did it in his library." So anyway, so we've wanted sort of people to replicate that. So I can add that to the list, and then again we can maybe talk about that. But exactly like that, if there are ideas that would be super valuable, whether or not you think it's useful for the rest, that's probably we can be the clearinghouse for that. But If you think that there are ideas that are valuable, that, let us know, and we will try to coordinate.
Just like also,
Yeah, so just.
I mean, not necessarily
Areas.
grants. There's plenty of things like that out there, but just like you said, developing a list of people to become your allies, like ideas for allies and outreach and
Okay.
and
And funding was one of the
yeah.
things that came up.
I mean,
Okay.
I know there's tons out there. It's just okay. Well, it'd also be nice to have some vocabulary to put